For almost 80 years, Europe lived under one simple assumption. If war ever returned to the continent, America would come. That promise shaped everything. European governments spent less on defense. Armies became smaller. Factories that once built tanks turned to civilian production. And the United States became Europe's ultimate security guarantee. Today, that assumption is beginning to change. Not through a dramatic announcement, but one summit, one budget, and one military exercise at a time. NATO is transforming itself into something it has never been before. Officials call it. Supporters describe it as the alliance's biggest transformation since the Cold War. Critics argue it's becoming an engine for permanent rearmament and defense industrial expansion. Either way, Europe is preparing for a future that once seemed unthinkable. A future where it may have to defend itself. So what exactly is NATO 3.0? Why are European governments suddenly committing hundreds of billions of euros to defense? And can Europe really deter Russia if America's role continues to shrink? To answer that, we have to go back to the moment NATO almost lost its purpose. For nearly half a century, NATO had one mission: contain the Soviet Union. Then, in 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. The alliance's biggest enemy disappeared almost overnight, and people began asking an uncomfortable question. If the Cold War was over, why did NATO still exist? Instead of dissolving, NATO reinvented itself. Its focus shifted beyond Europe's borders, from the Balkans to Kosovo, then Afghanistan. After the September 11th attacks, peacekeeping, counterterrorism, humanitarian intervention, territorial defense was no longer the priority. But that transformation came at a cost as the threat of a major European war faded. Defense budgets shrank, stockpiles declined, military industries slowed, and Europe increasingly relied on one country, the United States. For years, that seemed like a perfectly reasonable arrangement, until Russia began changing the security landscape once again. Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014 was NATO's first wake-up call. For the first time since the Second World War, borders in Europe had been changed by force. Members agreed to spend at least 2% of GDP on defense. Many still didn't. Then came February 2022. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine shattered the assumptions. That had shaped European security for 3 decades. This wasn't another counter-terrorism mission. It was industrial warfare. Thousands of artillery rounds fired every day. Relentless drone attacks. Electronic warfare. Long-range missiles. For NATO planners, Ukraine became more than a partner under attack. It became a real-world laboratory. Military officials watched inexpensive drones destroy multi-million-dollar tanks. Artificial intelligence speed up battlefield decisions. And supply chains become just as important as frontline soldiers. One lesson stood above all the others. Future wars won't only be won on battlefields, they'll also be won in factories. And that's where NATO 3.0 begins. For years, the debate inside NATO was simple. European allies needed to spend more on defense, while the United States remained the alliance's military backbone. Today, that conversation has changed. Officials now talk about burden shifting, not just burden sharing. The difference is significant. Burden sharing means paying more. Burden shifting means taking greater responsibility. For Europe's conventional defense, the reason lies thousands of kilometers away. American military planners increasingly see the Indo-Pacific, not Europe, as their biggest long-term strategic challenge. Every aircraft carrier, every bomber, every missile defense system stationed in Europe is one that can't be deployed in the Pacific. That doesn't mean America is leaving NATO. It still provides the alliance's nuclear deterrent, its intelligence, strategic airlift, and surveillance. But the message is becoming clearer. Europe must be prepared to stand on its own. That challenge is most visible in the NATO force model, the alliance's emergency response system that determines which troops and equipment can deploy first during a crisis. Recent proposals suggest the United States could reduce parts of its combat commitments while encouraging European allies to expand theirs. Supporters call it a stronger, more balanced alliance. Critics disagree. They warn Europe still depends heavily on American capabilities, from satellite intelligence to aerial refueling to heavy transport aircraft. Replacing those systems won't happen overnight. It could take years. That helps explain one number dominating NATO's future: 5%. At the 2025 Hague Summit, allies agreed to work towards spending 5% of GDP on defense and security-related investments. By 2035, far beyond the previous 2% target, around 3.5% will go towards military capabilities, troops, aircraft, missiles, air defense. The remaining 1.5% will fund cybersecurity, critical infrastructure, military mobility, and industrial resilience. The goal isn't simply to buy more weapons. It's to ensure Europe can build them, replace them, and keep producing them during a prolonged conflict. NATO officials call it a defense industrial revolution. Ukraine has shown why. Modern wars consume thousands of artillery shells, hundreds of drones, and expensive missile interceptors. Every single day, victory increasingly depends not only on battlefield success, but on whose factories can keep up the longest. Supporters argue Europe is finally preparing for that reality. Critics counter that NATO is becoming something much larger than a military alliance, a system tying together governments, defense industries, and emerging technologies. So which view is correct? That depends on one final question: can Europe actually build a military capable of deterring Russia, or will it remain dependent on the United States for years to come? Whatever the name, NATO 3.0 marks a turning point, not because the alliance is getting bigger, but because its role is changing. For decades, Europe relied on America's military strength. Now, it's being asked to shoulder far more of the burden. Whether that transformation succeeds will depend on more than how much money is spent. It will depend on Whether Europe can turn political promises into real military capability, because alliances are tested not during summits, but during crises. And NATO is betting that this transformation will be enough to deter the next one. Whether history agrees is a question only the future can answer.